Justine Whitchurch, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am great, thank you. Really good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. No problem at all. Thank you very much for coming on and giving up your time. I do really appreciate it, and I'm certain that there's going to be some value in this for a lot of the listeners. Obviously, I've done a little bit of research and read your story, so to speak, in terms of where you were and where you are now. So yeah, there's definitely some value in it for sure, from a number of perspectives too. Definitely. But why don't you firstly introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do now, just so people have some sort of perspective and context.
Yeah, sure. So Justine Whitchurch. I call myself a sobriety speaker because
Cool.
I bang on a lot about being sober and the trials and tribulations of that. And I'm a fitness trainer as well.
Okay.
So my business kind of combines the two of those things. I'm a 49-year-old mum of two. Do you want my full bio? I could have left the 49-year-old bit out. But
49 years young.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm on the Gold Coast.
Okay. Unreal. All right. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. So take us back before the fitness evolution of you and who you used to be, because obviously this podcast is about your alcoholism, which you openly talk about, full transparency, which I really appreciate. So if you want to take us back to those days, how it all started in terms of, I guess, I don't know, was it in the youth? Was it, we were just talking off air about you being in the music industry. Did that sort of introduce you to it more, or was there other avenues that popped up?
Sure. So look, I think in terms of my alcohol consumption and how it affected me, or how much I was drinking, or what stage it was different at different points in time. But if I go back to my early days maybe as a teen, when everybody was first introduced to alcohol, I probably didn't drink that differently to anybody else.
Okay.
It was, at a party, that kind of thing. I was in the music industry for a long time. I was a singer in the very commercial pop music here in Australia, and I drank through that, but I didn't necessarily, it wasn't probably the very beginning of me having an issue with alcohol, albeit I did at times medicate my way a little bit through my anxiety with that. So, auditions and different things that I might have been doing, every now and then there was the odd shot of vodka that would
take the edge off.
And inevitably make me forget my words on stage. So it was far from ideal. But I think the very first time now that I actually have got out the other side and I've done a lot of work and a lot of therapy, I know that I learned to medicate with alcohol pretty early on. Okay. So there was one particular incident that I remember. I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but I had broken up with a boyfriend. I was 19. I was house sitting a family member's house, and we were on and off. And we'd had a phone call, and he'd said, "Look, it's definitely off." And I was already in bed, and I remember going to the fridge and grabbing 2 bottles of beer, of all things. I just needed something, and went back to bed and drank them till I was calm enough to sleep. And although I just did that without even thinking at the time, later, when I've gone through all my counseling, we've had to kind of pinpoint, or through our therapy, pinpointed when I first actually used alcohol to medicate. And that was it. I now know that was potentially it.
Yep.
But fast forward, I had many years where alcohol wasn't really an issue. And it probably would have been in my early 30s, where I was going through quite a traumatic marriage breakdown, divorce, custody of kids and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew that I could medicate with alcohol. So I was doing that exorbitantly.
Wow, okay.
And that took me into some dangerous territory. And a couple of years after that, it would have been my late 30s is when I really started to hammer it. So I had just become extremely dependent on alcohol to just cope with everyday lives, or my natural coping mechanisms had just gone. They weren't there. And, there was still life's challenges, right? If they don't go away, something traumatic happens, it might ease off, but then there's, other things that come along. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the time when she was 7. yeah, it just got worse and worse, and my consumption became greater and greater. And we go to the real tail end of it. In the last 6 to 12 months, particularly the last 6 months of 2011, so I was 38 at the time.
Okay.
I was pretty much drinking 24/7, so it was a constant. Wow. It was a constant top up, and physically, at the very end, before I did go into rehab, and probably talk about that, yep. I was about 47 kilos. My liver was showing signs of cirrhosis. Wow. My platelets were non-existent. Yeah, and I had a couple of emergency hospital visits, and in the last one, they said, you literally, if you don't stop, you got months. My body everything was just shutting down.
Wow.
So it was, when I say near death, I wasn't actually exaggerating.
No, absolutely.
People bandy these terms around, but it actually was. It actually was. So it was, yeah, it was a 24/7 kind of event.
So was it like, would you reach for a drink as soon as you woke up in the morning? Was it that extreme?
It was in the end. Yeah. So yeah, wow. that or medication. So depending on what I had to do, if I couldn't get to alcohol, or it wasn't appropriate. I didn't really care about being appropriate in the end, but yep. I could potentially take my Valium or Xanax that the doctors were giving me at the time to get me through a period, because yes, when I woke up, I was having detoxing every day. Of course, there was withdrawals. My body, I physically needed the alcohol.
Wow. So when you said about that final visit to the hospital, and they said, look, you need to stop because of these reasons, was that an alarm bell, light bulb moment, or did it take more than that to get you into rehab? No, it didn't stop you?
No, it was, look, that was, there was, a lot of people talk about their one rock bottom. I think I had many, and there was lots of little epiphanies, and I didn't even see them as epiphanies. I think personally they actually just sat in my subconscious somehow. Something was something, the universe or God, whatever you want to call it, alerted me and said, you need to actually think about this. In hospital, in one of those visits, the only thing that I have 2 children who are now almost adults, 20 and 17. And at the time they were almost 10 and 7. Thankfully, very much, I had a great support network. I don't downplay that at all. So I'm one of the fortunate ones.
Yes.
And they were cared for. But the only thing that I cared about during that time, was them. Okay. So every sober moment, everything that I was, trying so hard to do in terms of, staying alive. And I wasn't consciously trying to kill myself, by the way. It's just where it was going, was for the kids. So I remember in that hospital visit, I had a visit from the counsellors who were, I think, they have to report things and to child safety and all sorts of things. They didn't, but they had a conversation with me, and it was the first time I had been asked, so who is looking after your children? How are the children being cared for?
Right.
And that really hit a chord, because I thought, oh my God, they've asked that question. Now I know they are being careful, so nothing's going to happen. But at the time, that was enough to sit there and really, I guess, sit in the back of my mind as things need to change. But there was one more incident that I do talk about, and I talk about this openly in my book, and that was my parents. My dad had taken the kids to school, brought them home to me, and I had been drinking that day. I was not supposed to be. I'd actually just entered rehab, and he looked at me and he said, "I can't leave the kids here with you tonight."
Yeah, wow.
And my daughter looked at me, and the kids just thought I was sick all the time. They really didn't have any idea. Yep. And my daughter had tears in her eyes, and she said, "Mum, I'm scared you're never going to get better." And I don't know. I totally think that definitely hit something at a soul level. Yep. And then it was pretty much, my hand was forced by my family to then make the next steps to get myself out of where I was.
Wow. Well, that was going to be my next question. What led you to rehab? So it was that, obviously, the moment your daughter mentioned that, plus the encouragement or insistence from your family to get you there. And you mentioned you'd already been in rehab once, so there was a failed attempt, was there?
No, I hadn't been in rehab. I was in Melbourne for a long time. I'm back on the Gold Coast now, and all my immediate family were on the Gold Coast. In Melbourne, my GP had put me in hospital on rest, so it wasn't rehab.
Right.
But when I came up here and those incidents occurred, and my family only had, look, they had an inkling of how bad things were, but I floored them when I came up. They really didn't know how bad it was.
Wow.
So they were taking me to hospital visits, psychologists, psychiatrists, and it was at the insistence of those specialists that they said, you need to enter. She needs to go to rehab of some kind. And it was suggested I went into a full residential program, and I really dug my heels in, and I didn't want to leave the kids. They were the only, as I said, they were the only thing that I cared about. So for me, being away from them, that would have been the last straw for me. So we agreed that I would go into a day program down there. I'd be driven home, so I could not go.
Yes.
And I had to do it. So I did go into a day patient program, and I did it twice.
Right. So residential meant you stayed there.
Yeah, I did not. I didn't stay. So I was fortunate enough at that time. I'd moved back to the Gold Coast, and my family, I was staying with my family. They were not letting me go anywhere. So I was under lock and key, so to speak, and they were looking after the kids. And yeah, so I had this day program that I went down to 3 days a week at Cromon Psych Clinic, actually, down here on the Gold Coast.
Okay. So how long was that for? And talk us through that process. Like, obviously you see a lot about this stuff on TV and in TV shows and stuff, but I've never spoken to anyone who's actually done it. What's the process involved, and how difficult was it?
Yeah, so well, I suppose you just minus the staying there overnight part. My days, so to begin with, you have to, with my level of dependency, I had a physical addiction that couldn't not be medicated out. So I had what's called a medical detox out externally at home, which was just doses of Valium that were prescribed for me with my GP and my psychiatrist. So I did that in conjunction with the day program. So the day program, I went down there, I'd go down there, I think it started at 9 o'clock, and it was group therapy. So licorice, all sorts, people from all walks of life, different demographics. Or really, I still am so thankful that I went into those rooms, because it gave me a real, I'm an empath as it is, but an understanding that, alcoholism or drug addiction doesn't discriminate. We were all from all different walks of life. Some of us had, genetic links with alcoholic parents. Some didn't. Some had beautiful lives that seemingly had nothing go wrong. Others had extreme adversity, but we're all addicts. And we learnt a lot about what goes on with mental health before you're medicating and that type of thing. A lot of mindfulness, which was great. My profession actually before then was, I was a workplace trainer and assessor. So I knew a lot about NLP and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of got this stuff, and I'm like, okay. But yeah, it was group therapy, working through lots of different things and getting to the bottom of the root of maybe some of the reasons why we were drinking, and how to maintain and establish better mental health, which is really a lot of the time where it comes from.
Of course.
So I did that for, I think the program was for 8 weeks, and I ended up doing it twice.
Right.
So, almost, I nearly finished the second one. Yeah. So a long period of time, in and out. And, to begin with, because it was so critical that I went, and I was not a willing participant, and my family drove me down and picked me up so that I couldn't not go.
Yeah. Can I ask so if you, at that stage, if you didn't have a drink for a period of time, what would happen? Would you be violently ill? Would you cramp up? How would your body respond without the alcohol for, a couple of hours or whatever?
Yep. At that particular time, before I was without medication, without Valium, I would get extreme heart palpitations, sweating, anxiety, like I'm literally on fire. Like my body felt like it was on fire.
Wow.
And yeah, it's extremely dangerous to do that unmedicated. People have heart attacks all the time. So, I think that's actually how Amy Winehouse started. It wasn't so much from, the actual alcohol at the time. It was the stopping. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm pretty sure
I believe
that's
you.
why
Yeah.
we need medical detoxes, because we're so physically reliant on it. The body just doesn't know how to cope. So heart attack is a massive risk.
Yeah.
Fishing, people can have loads of seizures.
Yeah. Wow.
So, for me, it was just over. I felt like my skin was crawling, anxiety, like there's no tomorrow. It's like somebody take this away kind of feeling.
Right. So the only way you saw to, I guess, suppress those feelings and emotions was to continue to drink. So it was just a vicious circle.
It was 100%. So, it quickly transitions. What people don't understand about alcohol is what starts quite innocently for some people when they start to ramp up their consumption. If it's regular enough, it's not just a psychological addiction, it's a physical addiction.
Yeah.
And it's a dependency.
Yeah.
So it's imperative that if you're getting to that point, look, you can have a big drinking day and not be an alcoholic or an addict, and how you feel the next day, right?
Yes.
That and your anxiety's heightened and all that type of thing. Well, times that by 20, and that's essentially what you feel like.
Oh God, I'd hate to
it's
think
not
that.
fun.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, now this is the interesting stuff. Now, I read that you were then recommended exercise as one of your rehab protocols, if you will. So talk me through that. Had you already done any, some form of training or exercise or whatever before this? And what was the specifics of that once you got recommended it?
Yeah. So prior to that, I was a token gym member. I went to the gym.
I like that.
I went to the gym when I needed to drop a dress size to go to a function.
Okay.
It was never sought after for anything other than that kind of thing, more aesthetic. I'd never been I was in the music industry, so I wasn't a sporty kid. I was the opposite of that. I did a lot of dancing and things like that, but that was never a regular part of my routine. So one of my main psychologists at the time, who was very athletic himself, he had said to me, almost as a by the way, which is interesting, but he had said to me, you definitely need to start exercising. And I've been, as I said, I've been dragged up to the Gold Coast. All of my family members, including my mum and my stepdad and brother and everything, were all members of a Fitness First, like around the corner.
Okay.
And at that point in my recovery, I was just ticking boxes that everyone wanted me to tick. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I was not, as I said, not a willing participant in all of this. So the gym seemed like the perfect thing when he mentioned it, because everyone could keep an eye on me because they're all going to be there. And I had a lot of social anxiety then, because I hadn't really been back out into the world as a sober person or trying to, everything was, my nervous system was totally raw. So I joined the gym, and I actually didn't even go into the main gym to begin with. There was a ladies' room upstairs.
Okay.
So I went into the ladies' room, pretended I knew what I was doing, and fumbled around. To begin with, I remember really early on, I actually felt safe in there.
Okay.
So I felt safe from my own head. It was regardless of whether I was exercising or not, it was a distraction, a place to be there was no temptation.
Sure.
And it was definitely a distraction. And then I started training a little bit more and really enjoying it. And I would say, so it was about the July, maybe or not even quite 2 months in, there was a personal trainer in the gym, and they were getting their quota of clients. And he actually approached my husband at the time and said, do you want any PT sessions? And my husband quickly said, no, not me, but my wife probably does.
Okay.
I gave him an absolute mouthful. I'm like, why are you doing this? This is giving me extra anxiety. I don't need personal. Why now? I've got to talk to this person. And I did. And he had quite an interesting past himself.
Okay.
And he had been a boxer. He had like 4 kids under the age of 6, like just tons of adversity and on and off the wrong right track kind of stuff, right? And I clicked with him. So I started doing personal training with him in the gym. And then, you know, he left the gym. And I'm like, great, what am I going to do?
Right.
Well, he started up his own studio at home, after his own CrossFit box kind of thing. So
Sure.
I followed him.
Okay.
And I really quickly started, I think I was training sometimes 4 days a week with him. Any bit of money that I had, I was just throwing into that.
Yeah, wow.
Because I was all of a sudden starting to feel things that I'd not felt in years, and sometimes not even remember that whether I'd ever felt.
Okay.
Psychologically and physically.
Right.
So his I guess method was very much CrossFit kind of style training at the time.
Yep.
Which, as you know, get yourself in, hammer yourself, push yourself to the limits. It wasn't kind of what I do now. And yeah, I got stronger and stronger physically, and with everything that I was doing physically, I noticed how that correlated psychologically. I was becoming stronger and stronger, and all of a sudden my mental health was getting better. I was feeling more positive and happy without any medication. And yeah, that was the start of me realizing that this, not only from the physiological perspective, but from a discipline perspective, and routine and regiment, that this lifestyle had the ability to keep me on track.
Right. Wow. Big light bulb moment. That's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I read a quote that you said, being physically fit and strong in turn gives you the ability to face life's challenges from such a much healthier perspective. Yep. I love that. I thought that was brilliant. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because obviously that's come from you.
Yeah.
And did you, I guess, from the early stages of, as you've identified with your training, identify that this can be my new existence?
Yeah, look, what I found and what I got from training and exercising in general was I got my power back. So when I started being able to, lift a weight above, 2 kilos, or run down the street without falling over 3 times, or those incremental things that I got as I gained strength and endurance with my training. It was just this shift in the power in my mind to be able to negate things, or to be able to, see them from a slightly lighter perspective, or just manage them. It was, I talk about sober clarity, but that came from not drinking for a certain period of time. But the exercise gave me power of the mind. So I could talk myself, I did probably 6 months after, about six or 7 months after I started training, I put myself into an entire start triathlon.
Wow.
And I had no bloody idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
I did. I mean, I trained for it, but the anxiety before that was so rife. And I managed to, every time I did something that I proved my head wrong,
right,
through the physical fitness, I started to be able to do that with everyday life things. So if I didn't think I could compete the workout or whatever have you, and then I did, I was like, see, you're constantly challenging your head, because it's a head game, right?
Of course it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Sport is psychology. And so I was then going into my everyday life, and it's like, oh my God, am I going to get the job, or, are the kids going to do this, or is my ex-husband going to do this? And then all of a sudden that same kind of way of thinking, or power in my thinking, would challenge my head again and say, hang on, you've got no evidence that this is going to happen. you can do this. So they were just the correlation between my physical health and my mental health and those two powers. It was so intertwined, and the more strength I got physically, the more power I had mentally.
I like that. I like how you use the word power. I think that's really what's powerful, isn't it? You know, you've created your own power through something so simple as exercise.
Yeah, because alcohol took my power away.
Absolutely, of course.
So, and I had very little, and I really didn't have the ability to just talk myself through things. I needed something else to shift. And, you know, I didn't know what that was going to be, and inevitably that ended up being exercise and training. Wow. And still is to this day.
And I was going to ask you about that, because just before we got on here, we spoke that you've competed several times as well. So, you know, because that's obviously at the top end of exercise in terms of, you know, an end game. But you've gone down that path as well as a goal, which is pretty remarkable considering where you were in life, you know, 20 odd years ago.
Yeah, I think I learned. So, you know, the first time that I competed, I was maybe so after I came out of rehab, I probably need to, for the next 18 months, I tried to be a social drinker. I really didn't come out of rehab thinking this is it for me. I thought if I get a handle of it, then I can be like everybody else. I came out and I didn't medicate anymore with alcohol, which was great. But and I set myself some pretty strong boundaries as to when I drink and what I do. And, you know, it was, you know, the last year I drank, it was on 3 occasions that year. And I said to myself, okay, well, on this date, you're going to this function, you can drink. I just could never have one. And it always ended up messy. Messy, and the next day I would feel horrific and I couldn't train. And all of a sudden, what I had, these things that I had benefited from not drinking, these, you know, wonderful parts of my life, like the training and the good nutrition and all those things that made me happy, I couldn't do them the next day because I'd been drinking. So through one thing or another, I ended up, after one particular incident, I stopped. I said to myself, I just can't do this anymore. It doesn't work. I know I can't be a social drinker. Most people can't who've had my level of addiction. It just doesn't happen. We like to think we can. And I stopped altogether. So then I set myself these new challenges, and, you know, age came into it as well. And I'm like, okay, right, well, you've done all of these things. You got to this point. Let's see what you can do. And I remember my husband at the time, he said to me, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And I'm like, that's just fired me up even more. Because I think he said something along the lines of, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You know, you're not 21 anymore, or something like that. Like, are you kidding? That's probably the worst thing that you could say.
Don't poke the bear.
Exactly. So yeah, I did. You know, I did bikini. I wasn't fitness. I did bikini in a couple of different federations between 2014 and 17. And I was already living the lifestyle. So for me, it kind of made sense. I go to a world gym. So it was one of those things that, why not? I want to see what I can do aesthetically with my body as well.
Of course.
And I loved the discipline. So I gave it a crack and had a couple of goes. It was never serious. This is what I want to do with my career. It was more setting goals for myself and
absolutely
and achieving them.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Can I ask, you just mentioned obviously your husband, and obviously we've referenced your kids a couple of times. After the second rehab, were your family members on eggshells somewhat around you in regards to their behaviours in drinking, or, you know, inviting you over to dinner or out to dinner and things like that? Was there a little bit of that in the atmosphere, or was it normal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think nobody was on eggshells. Everybody was super aware that I had zero pressure from people to drink again, unlike a lot of people who do. I was in such a bad state that anyone that knew me in that state knew that it's not a case of, oh, would you like a drink? You know, are you sure you can't have one? It was they knew I couldn't drink. I didn't know I couldn't drink. So my husband at the time made a decision himself I think I probably mentioned something, but when I came out of rehab, and I'll openly say, he does not mind me talking about it. He was a big drinker as well. So not with the dependency that I had, but he was a big drinker and pushed it really hard. So we enabled each other a little bit there.
Sure.
And he says to people that my almost losing my life to alcoholism was the best thing that could have happened to him, because he made a 360. He trains more than I do now.
Big statement, yeah.
We made a decision that there would be no drinking in the home unless there was an event here.
Okay.
So, and that's continued. We are now 10 years after rehab, and that does not occur. So he would never come home from work and have a drink.
Yep.
If we, he does drink occasionally now, but he trains, 6 or 7 days a week himself, and looks amazing for his age. He's super healthy and fit, probably more committed than I am. But he would drink on the odd occasion, and the rest of the family just, they were aware. I didn't put myself in positions early on, though, that I felt were going to tempt me or make me feel super uncomfortable. So I think you've got to be slightly responsible for that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So but things like the gym, when I first got well, I call it well because that's what it was. My parents, my husband traveled a lot for work, and they knew what the gym was doing for me. They knew. I call it my church, right?
Yep.
And I had small kids at the time, and he was away, and they're like, "Can we have the kids? Do you need to go to the gym? We'll have the kids. Go to the gym." So I had this incredible support network that just they could see I was overtraining to begin with. It was sometimes I come in there twice a day, but way better alternative, right?
Of course. Absolutely.
So it was a distraction. It was everything. It still honestly is a very safe place for me.
Okay. Yep. So how often do you train now? Just off the top?
I'm back to probably 4 to 5 sessions a week.
Okay. And do you ever find it challenging to go? Like, this is obviously a question I get a lot about motivation and things like that. Do you find it hard to get up some days and go, or is it just part of the week? It just happens?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yep, absolutely. Some days, I run I've got a business. I've got 2 kids. I do a million and one things. I'm time poor. My days, there's not enough hours in the day.
Yep.
So I get that same lag like every other person. And the mums, I said to them, I totally get it. But I know the alternative, and I don't feel great when I don't go. So there's my evidence. Whenever I'm challenged by those sorts of things, or I'm lacking some kind of, motivation or steam, so to speak, I go, the evidence is if you don't, you're going to feel like shit. And this is what's keeping you. When you, I say it even to my clients, when you least want to go is when you most need to go.
Absolutely. But that's a good point. Like, and when you do go on those days that you don't feel like going, generally after 10 minutes, you're so grateful for have gone. Because you feel amazing. You go, yeah, how good's this? Yeah.
Yeah. And you can always, if you're feeling exhausted and you're tired, any workout's better than no workout. Go through the bloody motions. It's just, it is what it is.
That's right. That's right. So in terms of advice, so obviously I'm assuming through some of the depths of alcoholism, you're in denial that you had a problem. Would I be correct in saying that? So, there'd probably people out there that would listen to this and deny that they do have a problem. What's your advice in regards to those that may need help or maybe seeking help? What's the steps? Who do they speak to? How does that sort of unfold?
Yeah. I was asked this question the other day. If you are questioning your relationship with alcohol, or you think you might have a problem, you pretty much probably do.
There's the first tell,
because it's unconscious before it becomes conscious.
Okay.
So if you're questioning it, you probably do. I guess it depends to what extent.
Yep.
So the first port of call for somebody that has, I think, an issue with alcohol, I still think that the traditional method, go to your GP, at least talk to them. Sometimes they're not great because they're smashing 5 wines a night themselves, and they're like, they're like, oh no, maybe that's not too bad. It's like, if this person's coming to you because they think they've got an issue with alcohol, can you please support that? Don't question their question,
Yep.
And if you require some medication, which you might do, there are other medications out there too that can help with cravings and all sorts of things that are a little bit different. Go to your GP first of all, and then I think, who will potentially refer you on to counselors and all that sort of thing. But find then people who are already in a position or doing what you want to be doing.
Okay.
So that relatability for me, social media it started to ramp up pretty much not long after I got sober, and I found sober communities and people that were already where I wanted to be. And, I've mentioned a number of times I had an incredible support network. Yep. A lot of people don't. So if you don't have that support network, in your kind of internal environment, you need to look for it externally, because you cannot do this shit on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
You 100% can't. And then tell, if you feel you can, and it's a difficult, it's a hard pill to swallow, but tell people around you why you're not drinking. Because that's the next thing is, if you've kept it to yourself and you've kept this quite hidden, people are going to question why all of a sudden you're not drinking, and then you get that peer pressure.
Yes.
Which is rife. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell people your truth, and I honestly think that it's about being open and honest, because you've got to get it out there, and getting it out there also then creates some accountability for you.
Absolutely. It's a good point you raised.
Start exercising, for God's sake.
Yes. Well,
start
of course.
exercising. Just move. You when you first decide not to drink, you need something else to do.
Need that outlet.
So, it's a distraction, and then exercising also helps with cravings.
Yep.
So it decreases your cravings. If you've been really hitting it hard, all of your serotonin and all of those things have just they're depleted. There is none.
Yeah.
We all know what exercise does for mental health, and
Correct.
all of those feel-good hormones. It starts generating them again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I used to get through an ugly divorce myself, and it was the best. It was like not free therapy, but it was great therapy nonetheless. All that negative frustration and energy you can, redirect into a good training session.
Yeah. And it should be mandatory in a GP's tick boxes
totally agree.
Before antidepressants are handed out willy-nilly.
I totally agree with that. It should be recommended to everybody.
It should be on a prescription.
That's exactly right. Everyone should be doing it more often, and it really baffles me how some people still find it challenging or hard, or stick to it for 3 days and then give up, because it is hard. Whereas the health benefits are so superior to,
we all want things now, don't we? We want
and that's the problem. That's exactly it. That's exactly the problem. Yeah. In terms of, you just mentioned, this might be a little bit of a segue, but you mentioned obviously the social pressures of drinking, and it is such a social convention. I guess it's part of our culture, isn't it? As Australians, we tend to have a drink around the football or the races or the weekend or a barbecue or at the beach or whatever. So obviously that pressure is always going to be there, and you go to a pub or a tavern or a restaurant or something, one of the first questions you get asked is, do you want to have a drink? What would you like to drink? Even the waiter comes up to you and says, okay, can I get you a drink? So that ongoing pressure is certainly always there, isn't it?
Yeah. We drink to celebrate, we drink to commiserate. And everything in between. So, culturally, we are really set up for disaster in that respect.
That's a good way of putting it.
No, it is. And it makes it that for those reasons alone, there are, I will say millions, because there are, of people that can't even contemplate not drinking, because they are of the mindset, how on earth will I ever function in society? But there's a wedding coming up. How could I possibly not drink? And these are people who don't have dependency issues.
Yeah.
So we are culturally, very inept with that kind of stuff.
Big time.
And it's not, we talk about it being, it's very much, I think, probably highlighted with men and, the beers and the bonding and the boys at the pub. But oh my gosh, mummy wine culture is I think it's even worse because it's sneaky and it's subliminal, and it's I call it the epidemic that'll outlive the pandemic, because there is women who are enabling and each other to literally just cope with everyday life challenges with alcohol, and they're bringing the kids into it. So it's, you know, it scares me. I can't stand all the memes. I think it's not humorous. It's really not bloody funny. You know, they're outwardly saying that, you know, I'm drinking because of my kids. What's that telling your kids?
Exactly. Yeah.
There might be 2 or 3 now, but in time that's going to be, you're teaching your children that the way you cope with life is, or cope with situations that are not easy, is to drink. And B, you're also, I think, telling your children that you're drinking because they stress you out. The only reason you're really drinking is because you can't handle your stress.
You can't handle the situation. That's
right.
right.
And I get the stress. Don't get me wrong. I have full empathy for that, because I have been one. I am, you know, still am one of those mums. I'm a bit older, but they get to look after me now. But the tables have turned. But it's just horrific, and it's, you know, it's so prevalent. It's not funny.
It is. Yeah, it's unfortunate. You're right. Well, let's streamline into your business, because obviously this has evolved because of your experience. So you've got a book, you do your coaching. Let's talk about that and what you offer, and you know, there might be someone that's listening that could reach out to you.
Yeah. So I have my book, which is Sobriety Delivered Everything Alcohol Promised, which pretty much is, the name says exactly what
it sure does.
What it is. And it is my there's a backstory on me in there, but it's my journey from near-death alcoholic to where I am now, and the steps that I took, so which are through fitness and the other, you know, the myriad of therapies that I got along the way. I am still a fitness coach, so I offer fitness coaching, and, you know, I tend to attract a client that potentially has issues with alcohol or mental health as well. So I, you know, in my programs, I offer, you know, things like, you know, email series, all my tips on, you know, integrating back into society, alcohol free, and how to get hold of to maintain the sobriety. I'm not a drug and alcohol counselor. I'm a lived expert. So they're literally just my own personal tips on how I did it. So, you know, I offer that. I've just started getting into public speaking as well about this, because I speak a lot about it. So I'm like, well, I might as well actually do this
absolutely
for a living as well. So it's to be fair, my business is changing dramatically, and 12 months ago, the larger percentage of my clients were women.
Right.
At the moment, it's looking like it's tipped the scales. I've got, you know, things like my socials are a little bit different. My socials are way more male heavy than they are female.
Wow.
So they're struggling in both ways. You know what? I'm going to say with men, they engage very differently with me in regards to what's going on for them personally. Women are very upfront. We talk a lot. We're a lot more, they will engage quite publicly on social media or be quick to tell you their story. The men do it privately. They'll message me and they'll ease themselves in, and it might be, you know, I love what you're doing. I can relate. Then I have to ask the next question.
Yep.
And it comes out. But men need a soft landing. And I think I found that men tend to, and from what they've told me, men tend to be able to talk about these things a little bit more openly with a female than a male sometimes. There's a little bit less judgment, maybe.
Yep, maybe. It's interesting, because men, you know, I can only speak from experience, but men do tend not to comfortably share a lot of personal information at the best of times, really. Yep. So when you're talking about a problem like alcoholism or something similar, you probably don't want to share it because it's not manly to do so.
Correct.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, interesting. Wow. Oh, that's good. Like, you know, if you're accepting of both male and female, I think that's fantastic. Whoever you can help. Yeah.
This is it. At the end of the day, you know, I feel it's my obligation to help anybody that's got an issue with alcohol, show them the path that I took, and give them a little bit easier access to finding their own way out.
Absolutely, finding their true path. I think that's fantastic. Oh wow. Okay. Well, we'll start to wrap it up, Justine.
Yeah,
but
sure.
That's been brilliant. I'll finish on the personality question, which I ask every guest, and that is who you'd have over to dinner. So this is obviously based around your own personal likes, dislikes, etc. So it could be male, female, alive, dead, fictional, non-fictional. Could be a couple. Who you'd like to sit down with and have a meal with and a good conversation.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
test a lot of people. I've had some really wild answers.
Gosh, that's a really good question. And I keep going. Why am I going to dead people all the time? I don't know. It's interesting. Somebody that I have always, I was clearly in the music industry for a really long time.
Yes.
And somebody that I just have always adored through writing and how they express themselves was George Michael. He's not here anymore.
No, he's not.
Really.
No.
But I would, if he was still alive, I would have him here. He would have me mesmerized.
Brilliant artist.
Yeah, brilliant artist. So deep.
Yep.
If you've read a lot about him, there was, he's a tortured man, and yeah, I'd love to just sit down and have a soda water and lime with him. That's the first person that probably came to mind.
Okay, good answer. I haven't had George Michael before, so that's really good. Yeah, I like that. No, that's excellent. Oh, well, thank you so much. Now, if someone did want to reach out to you, how do they find you? You're on Instagram, Facebook. Yep. You've got a website. Do you want to just quickly rattle those off?
Sure. So my Instagram is Just Whitchurch with 2 S's.
Okay.
Website justinewhitchurch.com.au.
Yep.
And Facebook the same.
Okay, I'll put them all in the show notes as well. Yeah, cool. That'd be great. It's been a pleasure, Justine. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
It's been great.
There's so much value in that, and I'm sure everyone that listens will agree. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Paul.
No problem. Okay.